Imagine and picture this. Delhi's Red Fort on one side, Istanbul's Topkapi Palace on the other. Agra's Taj Mahal on one side and the dome of Hagia Sophia on the other. Two superpowers, two world conquering empires in the same era but on different lands. This is not just a story, friends. This is the era of the 16th and 17th century when the world's two most powerful empires, Mughal Sultanate and Ottoman Caliphate, were dominant in their respective regions. On one side were our Mughal emperors from Babur to Aurangzeb, who cast such a spell on the Indian subcontinent that even today we speak of their buildings, art and culture. On the other side were the Ottoman sultans, who brought three continents under one flag. They were feared in Europe, Asia and Africa, all three. But the question is, if these two were to clash head on, who would win? Whose army was stronger? Whose treasury was heavier? Whose cannons roared louder and whose horses ran faster? Today in this video, we are going to do a comprehensive comparison from military power to economy, from culture to technology. Watch the full video because the climax will reveal who the real winner was. The year was 1526, the Battle of Panipat. Ibrahim Lodi's vast army stood in front while behind them lay a small dream, Babur's dream. He was a warrior who was raised in the bloodlines of Genghis Khan and Tamerlane. Their own kingdom of Fargana in Central Asia had been lost, defeated on all the sides, homeless but not defeated. There was a fire in their hearts, the fire to become king again. And then the thunder of cannons echoed across the plains of Panipat. Smoke of gunpowder rose, and when the smoke cleared, a new emperor sat on the throne of Delhi. Babur, the first Mughal emperor. Babur wrote in his autobiography, Baburnama, I have written the story of every victory, every defeat, every pain. Later, I built this empire on its foundation. Akbar the Great, Shah Jahan and Aurangzeb, like the king who changed the map of India. But the story of the Mughal Empire was just a beginning. At the same time, thousands of kilometers away, another empire was sharpening its sword. There was time of 1299, that is closer to Babur 250 years ago. In a small principality in Anatolia, present-day Turkey, there was a chieftain, Osman I. He raised his sword and said, "This sword is Ghazi's, a warrior of the faith." And that's it. A story began that would continue into the next 600 years. It lasted till. The Ottoman Empire wasn't built in a single major battle, friends. It was built gradually, one step at a time, by uniting small tribes and most importantly, with a passion to protect and expand Islam. Where the Mughals had the legacy of Timur and Genghis Khan, right there the Ottomans had the passion for religion and the spirit of jihad. And this spirit was so powerful that soon their flags started flying Asia, Africa and Europe. The fall of Constantinople in 1453, when Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II defeated the Byzantine Empire, was the day the whole world realizes that a new superpower had been born. While Babur was fighting the Afghans and Rajputs, the Ottomans were fighting Christian powers of Europe. For both, ruling was not just a game of power. This was a fight for survival. Now friends, building an empire is one thing, but maintaining and expanding it, that is the real challenge. And the biggest role in this challenge is of the army. So now the question arises, was the Mughal army more powerful or the Ottoman army? Who had the better strategy? Whose cannons were more dangerous? Whose cavalry was faster and more agile? Let us now uncover the military might of both the empires and see who had the real power. If we talk about the Mughals, their army was heavily dependent on cavalry. The strategy of the Mughal army was speedy cavalry, heavy artillery and elephants. Let me tell you here that the Babur was the one who brought cannons to India. The kings of India did not have any solid method to fight with these cannons. Due to this, Babur won from Panipat to Khanwa, despite his army being small. He used the Tulugma system. The interesting thing is that the Ottomans also had adopted a strategy similar to the Tulugma system. Well, if we look at the administrator of the army, then in the Mughals, Mansabdars were the chief officers of their army. They had their own private army which used to train the army and use it in war. Although this system established loyalty, but one problem with it was that central control and uniform training of the army could not be done. Due to this, when the Mughals went downhill, their army also started weakening. The Mughal army became the biggest during the time of Aurangzeb, when his army comprised 6 lakh to 7 lakh people. This included cavalry along with infantry, artillery and elephant squads. Just imagine that he had a cavalry force of around 2 lakh. At this time, the Mughal army was the largest army on the earth. Now, if we look at the Ottoman Empire, it had the most advanced and disciplined military organization in the world. Their greatest source of strength was Janissaries. These were the Ottomans' elite forces derived from the Devshirme system. In this system, Christian children were captured and converted to Islam. A very important aspect here is the religion and its use. I'll explain more about this later. Now, the Christian children who were converted were the subjects to rigorous training and become strong soldiers like commandos. These warriors were adept at using firearms during the early Ottoman period. They were infantrymen who faced the European cavalry. In addition, the professional cavalry of the Sipahis were associated with the Timur system. In this system, any conquered territory was divided between the soldiers and the Janissaries. But conquering new territory was the most important step to victory. And so, these armies would periodically attack and conquer areas. Now, which battle did these two armies win? Speaking of the Mughals, their most notable expansion occurred during the reign of Akbar. Akbar reigned from 1556 to 1605. He brought the Rajputs under his control, adopting a policy of forming marriage alliances with them, and also expanded his empire to Gujarat and Bengal. Aurangzeb, on the other hand, significantly expanded the remaining Deccan region. However, the Deccan wars were lengthy and costly, nearly depleting Aurangzeb's treasury. The story of the Ottoman Empire was different. All its main battles were fought in Europe. By conquering Constantinople in 1453, Mehmed II achieved a major milestone in Ottoman Empire. This victory marked the end of the Eastern Roman Empire. In 1526, the year Babur founded the Mughal Empire, Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent conquered Hungary at the Battle of Mochast. His army even reached the gates of Vienna. The Ottoman army did not deplete the treasury like the Mughals. Rather, their expansion was based on the war booty and revenue territories, which ensured their economic stability. The combination of Janissaries and artillery helped them win many major wars until the 17th century. But could a such large empire be run solely by military might? The answer is no. Even empires cannot survive long unless their administration is strong. Therefore, it is important to see what differences or similarities there were in the administration of both the empire. Look, both the Mughal and the Ottoman empires are known as centralized empires, but the foundation of their administration were very different. Mughal rule was based on the Mansabdari system. Mansabdars were appointed officers in both the military and administration, receiving salaries in cash or jagirs. They had their own ranks and were required to maintain their troops accordingly. The system was a mix of loyalty, competence, and centralized control with direct interference from the emperor. Most importantly, Mansabdars were not permanently stationed in one place. They were frequently transferred to prevent them from exerting influence in one place and turning against the empire. This was a prime example of Mughal centralization. On the other hand, the foundation of the Ottoman administration was the Timar system. The Timar was a type of military fiefdom granted to cavalry soldiers. In exchange for this fiefdom, they provided military service to the state. While it might seem like there is no difference between the Ottomans and the Mughals, this was not the case. A significant difference was that the soldiers received only the revenues from the Timar lands. They did not have the other powers, such as administering justice or running the police administration. These tasks were performed by central officers appointed by the emperor. This meant that central control extended even to the village level. A significant difference between the two was the succession of power also. The Mughals had no fixed rule. The sword shall rule. This meant that upon the death of every king, a brutal civil war would erupt among their sons. Although this didn't occur until Akbar's time, as Mughal power was still gaining ground. After Akbar's death, a succession of struggle broke out between Jahangir and his son Khusro. Then the politics between Shah Jahan and Noor Jahan also became quite toxic due to the succession struggle. After that, you all know the story of Aurangzeb and Dara Shikoh. But among the Ottoman sultans, by the 15th century, succession became problematic on a different level. During this period, a policy was adopted called fratricide policy, which means the policy of killing one's brother. Furthermore, Sultan Mehmed II legalized this policy. Under this policy, the Sultan who ascended the throne was required to kill all his brothers to prevent any further plots against him. While this sounds brutal now, such measures were very common in medieval times to protect one's throne. This Ottoman move eliminated any potential for succession struggles like the Mughals. However, this policy was later abolished and replaced by another policy, the confinement of princes in cages within the palace. However, this practice ultimately made subsequent Ottoman kings inexperienced. Thus, this administrative structure had a profound impact on both the empires. Now, let's turn the aspect without which it becomes difficult to sustain the empire. Yes, without economic comparison, the state of an empire cannot be ascertained. The economies of both the Mughal and Ottoman sultanates were largely agriculturally based. The Mughal revenue collection system was quite complex, especially the Zabt system implemented by Akbar. It involved measuring land, assessing yields, and determining taxes based on the average value of the previous 10 years. Thus, land revenue was the largest source of income. The responsibility of collecting it fell on the zamindars and mansabdars. While this seems theoretically sound, it was the corruption of the zamindars and local officials that led to their decline in the later phase of the Mughal Empire. Ottoman Empire's economic foundation was even stronger, as it controlled trade routes across 3 continents. They controlled the spice trade between the fertile lands of Egypt, Iran, and India. The empire generated significant revenue by imposing tolls and border taxes on these routes. During their time, cities like Istanbul and Cairo were centers of world trade. It is rare for the Mughals to be heavily dependent on silver imports from India. This was because European companies purchased textiles and spices from India in exchange for silver. However, the Ottoman Empire, on the other hand, had direct control over the trade routes, making their dependence on silver less significant. Therefore, both empires developed strong economies, but the Ottoman Empire had greater direct control over international trade. Now, if we talk about religion and society, religion was a central feature of the politics and religion of both empires. But there was a stark difference between them. The Mughal Empire, especially during Akbar's time, was known for its religious tolerance. Akbar's Din-e-Ilahi and his policy of Sulh-e-Kul gave Mughal rule a distinct identity. Akbar abolished the jizya and established marriage alliances with other non-Muslim rulers, giving them high positions. At the same time, the Ottoman Sultanate also ruled a multi-religious society, but their rule was more conservative. The Ottoman sultans were protectors of Islamic law. The Ottoman administration was based on the Milad system. This system allowed each religious group within the empire, such as Orthodox Christians, Jews, and Armenians, to obey their own religious leaders in the matters of internal religion and law. But in return, they had to pay the jizya. In the Ottoman Empire, the power and reach of the ulama was immense. Among them was the Sheikhul Islam, a high-ranking religious official who had the power to question the legal validity of Sultan's order. Therefore, while the Mughal Empire tended towards a more flexible, individual-based tolerance, the Ottoman Empire provided legal and structural tolerance. Now, if we look at it, there were many differences between the two in terms of art and culture also. Mughal architecture was a remarkable fusion of Persian, Islamic, and Indian styles. The Taj Mahal is an example. Mughal architecture is characterized by the use of red sandstone and white marble, along with large dome and pitradura or inlay works. Humayun's tomb and Fatehpur Sikri are also excellent examples of Mughal art. Meanwhile, Ottoman's architecture primary objective was to demonstrate power and divine right. Their greatest architect was Mimar Sinan, who blended Byzantine and Islamic architecture in Istanbul. His mosques are characterized by their grandeur, cascading domes, and pointed minarets. The Suleimani Mosque is prime example. Similarly, in the area of painting, the Mughal emperor patronized miniature paintings. This type of painting depicted the natural world, court scene, hunting, and battles. Mughal paintings featured very clear human faces and emotions, which at times seemed influenced by European art. Ottoman miniature paintings called Nakkashne were more traditional, often with less work on human faces. In terms of literature, the primary language of the Mughal court was Persian, and texts such as Mahabharata and Ramayana were translated into Persian on Akbar's order. The language of the Ottoman court, however, was Ottoman Turkish, which was very heavily influenced by Arabic and Persian. Mughal culture gave rise to an Indo-Persian culture which laid the foundation of Hindustani civilization. Ottoman culture formed from the intersection of three continents, gave rise to a more cosmopolitan identity, a confluence of European, Middle Eastern, and Balkan cultures. These are all the things that reveal the differences between the two empires. But the story of their decline is also fascinating. The decline of both empires lasted for several centuries, influenced less by external invasions and more by internal decay. The decline of the Mughal Empire began rapidly after the death of Aurangzeb. The most prominent of these internal crises were the deadly wars of succession, which consistently eroded the empire's stability. Another cause was the crisis of the Mansabdari system. The number of Mansabdars had increased significantly, but land for granting Jagirs was scarce. This fueled corruption and rebellion among officials. The endless wars in the Deccan completely drained the Mughal treasury. Then came the invasion of Nadir Shah in 1739, who sacked Delhi, took the peacock throne and destroyed the Mughal Empire's remaining prestige. The last Mughal emperor, Bahadur Shah Zafar, was exiled to Rangoon by the British in 1857, marking the formal end of the Mughal Empire in India. The Ottoman Empire, on the other hand, died a long and slow death. Its first major blow was the decline of the Janissary Corps. These elite soldiers gradually became so powerful and so corrupt that they devoted themselves more to the making and unmaking of sultans than to military service. They also clung to their outdated technology while European armies were modernized. After failing at the final siege of Vienna in the late 17th century, the Ottomans suffered a series of defeats in European lands. Russia and Austria seized their Balkans territories. After World War I, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk abolished the sultanates in 1922 and the modern Republic of Turkey was established in 1923. The collapse of both the empires thus demonstrated that the need for a strong central authority and military modernization to adapt to changing times. So friends, these were the areas where we compared both the Mughal Empire and the Ottoman empires. But the question is, who was the greater of the two? The answer to this question, friends, is not very easy. Both left a profound impact on their respective lands. But the answer to who was greater is not unequivocal. Both were great. One conquered world with the sword, the other hearts with the culture. So if you like the video, please like and share and subscribe this channel for the further updates. Thank you.